you can be critical of something without making an attack on the person who's created whatever. And you've all seen critics, or we've all seen critics where it's almost like a competition to show how creatively you can hate something and put it into words and just lob it out there. It's almost like they stopped doing dishes just to figure out how they could be, to show how smart they are with this. And I think sometimes I saw that starting to kind of leak into our world, where it was like, oh, I hate this. Move out of the way. Let me show you how creatively I can hate on this. And at the end of the day, we can say that we're in the marching arts, that this is professional, and that, this is no different than if we were putting something out there on Broadway, or this is a professional album by an artist and all. At the end of the day, it's kids. It's kids and a teacher. And those kids are going to hear your words. And that approach should always be taken into account. With every project that I sit in front of, I just feel like I'm about to screw it up again. Like I've been doing this for a while, and it never, every time I look at a blank Sibelius score, measure one, or I'm sitting down with that mood chart or the events chart, and it's at the top left of the page, I go, this is about to be terrible, and I'm about to mess this all up, and no one will ever trust me with this again, and I'm awful. And I have wished most of the time that I've been doing this that would go away. Up until a few years ago, I was like, wait a minute, this is the thing that keeps me honest. The thing that keeps me honest is that I'm only one poor choice away from just wrecking this ship, and I've got to make sure that everything that I think of and everything that I try to put together has some kind of purpose, and I need checks and balances.
Hey everybody, this is Tim, the Beast of the Marching Arts, and I think this is going to be such a great conversation. I love talking to this man, Tony Lymon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How about you, Tim?
I'm doing great. It is always fun to get together with friends and talk about marching stuff and talk about teaching and instructing, and we love doing this. And everybody that's listening, thanks for being here, my friend. I'm so glad that you're listening as well. So Tony, I think everybody knows who you are. You've been on podcasts before, and you're sort of, everybody knows who Tony Lymon is. But anyway, obviously at Petal High School and that great drum line there, but fill everybody in case they don't know a little bit about yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Tony Lymon. I'm here in the metropolis of Petal, Mississippi, down in South Mississippi near the Gulf Coast. I have been at Petal High School for 23 years, just trying to, help the community and help the kids, to see all of the wonderful things about the marching arts that I've been able to experience. I am, as far as my DCI affiliations, I'm now with Carolina Crown Drum and Bugle Corps as the audio systems designer and audio caption supervisor. And right now it's just great to be here with Tim, my good friend Tim, who is the beast looking over his shoulder, the beast overlooking the beast.
That's right. That's right. I have my mascot there behind me, everybody. If you're watching the video version, thanks for watching. So Tony, you have a great social media presence. I think you post a lot of things that people like and react to and respond to. And I think it's really great that you do that. So that's how this conversation got started, because I saw something that you posted. And I'm going to start everybody with Tony's permission by simply reading this post, because it got a huge response, including from me. And Tony, I immediately was like, I love this. Let's talk about this. So everybody, I'm awesome. Going to read this post right now. Here's what he said. And these first things are in quotes. Being direct, telling it like it is, I speak my mind. All noble things with respect to honesty and transparency. However, it is not a license to be cruel to people. You must figure out the difference. It's as simple as having love for whom you're being direct with. Otherwise, you're just an honest jerk. Tony, I loved this. I love that we're going to get to talk about this. Was there something, I mean, you don't even have to answer this, but is there something that precipitated this particular post?
Well, I run into this a lot, And I think I followed up this post with, whenever you're in a leadership position, especially when as like the director or the CEO or in charge of the whole ship, I can see from my position, or a lot of people who are in my position use that notion as kind of a badge of honor, meaning that, because I'm honest and because I'm direct, that means I'm being the most real. And there is something to be gleaned from that. I think that's great. However, I think it almost presents this cowardice pretense where we can kind of offload some of our frustrations at people that we are supposed to lead. And I think that is the impetus of a very toxic culture, that especially in the marching arts, that we can find ourselves in, and that can sometimes be an ostensible justification for doing that. And when I post things like this, it's by no means, it's usually because I need to hear myself say that to me.
Sure.
And usually when I put that out there, I want to hear people's feedback on that. It's not, look at me, these are the things that I do and I'm better than everyone else. It's like, this is what's on my mind. Let me share it with my friends.
Well, I can tell you that's the way they always come across to me, whenever I see them. And it's sort of like, I'm thinking about this and I'm sort of checking myself up on this. And I think this is great. And I think that's the way people responded clearly in the comments. The comments that people made were sort of like, oh yeah, man, I have to. And I got to tell you, what was so interesting to me is, one of the things I've been most excited about the last couple years doing webinars and conversations and video interviews and stuff is the word authenticity keeps coming up. And people are like, the more I'm authentic in front of my students, the more they respond. And of course, if I'm being authentic, I give my students permission to be authentic. So there's this great sort of new or current thing that people are thinking about and doing. But the flip side of that is you have to also figure out how to be kind and empathetic and care for your students and make sure they understand that in the midst of all of that being authentic. And I've been saying lately, Tony, that the reason this resonated with me is the longer I do this sort of design arranger consultant thing, the more I find that my clients really appreciate if I'm really direct with them. It doesn't do anybody any favors if I beat around the bush. Like if I say, listen, this is a really bad idea, let me tell you why. Or, gee, maybe we could do that a little bit differently. But I had to learn and figure out what that language was to use and how to approach it so that they understood that I was coming from a place with some love and care.
Absolutely. And I think with this whole designer relationship that you have with a client, and, not only am I a designer, but I have designers that work with and for me. I always tell people, like, Brett Favre, Tiger Woods, those people at the top of their game, and they have coaches. They have to have someone that can look at what they do, even if they're at the top of their game, that can look at them objectively in a way that you can't look at yourself, and be honest with them. And that's the relationship that I try to get. And I tell all of the people that I hire to help me be a better designer and be better for my kids, I want to cry now instead of crying at Dayton or crying in Indianapolis or crying at state finals and finding out the thing that I thought was so great for my kids is not so great. I don't want you to tell me that I'm great to save my feelings. However, the delivery of it can be in a way that is approached from kindness, to where it's not an attack on, because obviously if I came up with that, or whomever you're designing for has come from a place of authenticity and come from a place of honesty, and most importantly, a place of vulnerability, to where they got their creative thoughts out there and were able to expose. That's a lonely place to be. And when you make yourself vulnerable, an attack can not only be harmful and hurtful, but it makes you just that much less willing to be vulnerable again. And I think if we as designers and people that we're people who are being direct can keep that in mind, that we're dealing with a vulnerable person who has taken a chance. I think if we approach it from that angle, it will make us less likely to be cruel in that sense, or at least evaluate it before we throw it out there.
Yeah, and the thing I love about that is that I don't think that's that hard to tap into. Like if you have
Right.
ever created anything, if you've ever taken any group and put them out in front of an audience, particularly in front of the judge, or if you've ever taken an idea and told somebody about it, we all have that experience of how incredibly vulnerable that is. And the thing is, Tony, like we've all thought a lot about this. We fall in love with these ideas, and this show and this idea is our baby, and like it's sort of like you're showing your baby to somebody, and we all know you can't tell somebody their baby is ugly. It's my favorite,
No,
one of my favorite Seinfeld episodes about the ugly baby, and they can't say it, of course. But the idea of remembering how you feel, if I can remember how I feel when I'm vulnerable, when I'm pitching a show idea, when I'm taking a group to be judged, when I'm sharing who I really am with somebody, I think that's not hard to tap into when you remember that part. So I love that you said that.
Right. And I remember going to for the percussion advisory board with WGI, and at those meetings, they will normally have an adjudicator sit in the room, just to hear the conversation that's happening in there. And in the world class, one of the part of the language of the criteria that the judge, the adjudicator can take on is the role of critic. And I had to raise my hand on this because I was like, a critic, you can be critical of something without making an attack on the person who's created whatever. And you've all seen critics, or we've all seen critics where it's almost like a competition to show how creatively you can hate something and put it into words and just lob it out there. It's almost like they stopped doing dishes just to figure out how they could be, to show how smart they are with this. And I think sometimes that I saw that starting to kind of leak into our world, where it was like, oh, I hate this. Move out of the way. Let me show you how creatively I can hate on this. And at the end of the day, we can say that we're in the marching arts, that this is professional, and that, this is no different than if we were putting something out there on Broadway, or this is a professional album by an artist and all. At the end of the day, it's kids. It's kids and a teacher. And those kids are going to hear your words. And that approach should always be taken into account.
I remember when I learned this, there was a time when I was, doing, like, sharing with my friends reviews of DCI shows, whatever, and there were always shows that I didn't like. But then there was some point came when I realized, wait a minute, like, these people really tried hard. Nobody, like, somebody said to me one time, nobody ever tries to create a boring show. Nobody ever tries to create a show that the audience is going to hate or not like or not respond to. Everybody's trying to create it in their own authentic voice and coming from wherever they are. And once I finally understood that, then I realized, okay, I can not like a choice that somebody made as they're creating their show, but that doesn't mean that I have to be cruel or that I can't like them still. I can like a person, and I can like a group, and I can support those students, even if I feel like some of the things they've been asked to do or the design choices aren't things that I really think were very successful.
Exactly. And even with the worst product you've ever seen, there's something good about it. If it is the single thing that they finished, they had a vision, they saw it through, they rehearsed it, they got it to the point where it was presentable, and they brought it, they packed up trucks, found parking, got out of there, rehearsed, and got to the performance. That is a feat within itself. So there's a basic level of appreciation that you should have for a product, even if you think every note that they hit from the first to last was terrible. because you have to think about the thousands of people that didn't get to that point, the thousands of people that talked about putting a product together and they just didn't.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting is this is coming to stark release the last 2 years because, of course, we've had this shutdown. People are really struggling, and I keep having these conversations, and I'm glad we're having it again because I keep wanting to remind everybody, listen, you don't know what somebody's up against. You don't know what their community was like. One community, and then right down the street, it can be completely different. And sometimes they haven't seen their kids at all, and sometimes they've been sort of back to normal, and you just don't know. And so, I feel like hopefully we've all been reminded what you just said. Just getting the kids together, teaching them something, and having them show up to perform, like that's a win. That's a huge thing, especially now. So
Right.
like if we ever didn't get this message before, hopefully we've got it now. I keep telling everybody, listen, this past fall, it's like, it doesn't matter what everybody's doing. If they're showing up and kids are getting to do band, let's celebrate.
Right. And people say all the time, well, there's no defense in band. I was like, oh, yes, there is. You've got to fight tests. You've got to fight people breaking up with their girlfriends and boyfriends. You've got parents who are grounding kids. You've got them remembering what to do, showing up, getting sick. We got a deadly virus that's out trying to. The defense is doubled in size and is out there. So, again, just getting the product to a place where they can present it should cause people who are evaluating it and who are in charge of it a whole new perspective.
Yeah, I love that. And if I have that basic context going in my head, then when I am trying to give someone some advice or I'm criticizing the show or however you want to say it, then I can start by saying, in my head at least, if not out loud, like, this is awesome. Here your kids are. I love the effort. I love what you're trying to do. Let's talk about a couple things that maybe, we could switch a little bit to make this better or make this more effective, or, I don't know, there's ways to say it, but then they know that you know who they are, you see them, you know where they're coming from. I've been there too. I think it's sort of like just, I love the marching arts, like I love
Right.
going to see an indoor drum line. I love singing Winter Guard. And even when I don't love the show, I still love that it's there and that they're doing it.
Right. And I have to say, I'm gonna call out someone, and I hope that I hope this is okay. But when Petal High School was first year in world class, and I was trying to figure out the class, I knew I had the kids to do it. We didn't have many of the resources, but I wanted to figure it out. And the kind of the model that I've set for that group is we're just going to jump into the deep end of the pool and eventually we're going to swim. Well, that year we were dead last in world class. But there was one judge at World Championship. It was Mike McIntosh. He spent probably more time on his wrap up than he did giving us feedback during the entire show. He goes, you know what, man, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I know that you're trying to make something happen down there in Mississippi, and I just want to say that you're real close to doing it. It's like, it may not seem like it today, but if you keep on this path and keep at it, eventually this is going to pay off. And that was it was almost like, for me as the leader of the group, that was a gold medal for me. And it was a stamp that said, all right, we're headed in the right direction. We're not there yet, but at least we're doing something right. And I played that over and over and over again in my head as I was trying to become a better designer. I reached out to people to get help. And the next year we were in world class finals and been in pretty much ever since then. And I have to give a shout out to Mike for not taking the badge of being a critic to go, you know what, this is terrible. It's last place and you shouldn't be here. He didn't take that approach. And from that, I got better and my kids got better.
Man, I get emotional hearing that story. Like, that just means so much. Like, people don't know, one word of encouragement, can change someone's life, can change the
Right.
direction of, and this is what you're describing, and Mike, of course, is wonderful. And I would assume that he, he's been there. Like that's what we're kind of talking about. Like, remember when you were there and you had a band and you were just trying to make it into something. Like, I remember that. I remember having those kids standing in front of me, and they had that look in their eye, like, we want to be good, but we don't know what to do. Can you help us?
Right.
And I was like, well, I don't know if I know what to do, but like, that was exciting. And then, of course, we all hopefully get to the point where we have these great groups, and we don't need to forget what that was like. And that's so powerful. I love that story.
Exactly. And that hasn't left me, and it affects how I talk to people. It affects how I go about doing things. And, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I get it right every time. I absolutely don't get it right every time. But at least I have a measuring stick. I can at least evaluate when I've screwed something up as it relates to what we're talking about, that I can go, you know what, I said these things. I need to get back to what I said. So when I put these things out in the universe, it's aimed at myself to keep myself in check as well.
Yeah, no, I love this. And I think this is such a great conversation because, if you got it right all the time, that means you're not doing it right. You know what I mean? Like, you have to take chances. Let's grow. Let's try something new. I sometimes I've been doing this designing thing, working with band directors, gosh, almost 30 years now, Tony. And like, I can always tell when somebody's stuck in their rut and they're like, I know this works. I know this is safe. This always scores well. And so they keep, and I'll try to, let's take some chances. You can't always just try to win that contest. Sometimes you just have to try to grow. And I will tell you, the best year I ever had as a band director, my kids and I went way out. I guess I'll admit it. We actually did a marching show to the Rite of Spring. And I mean, I look back on this and I was like, I was young. I was so like ambitious. It was ridiculous, Tony. But I got to tell you, it was probably the best year my students ever had. And I had band parents come up to me and say, you didn't win every show this year, but wow, my kid grew so much and he loved every minute of what this little venture you guys all went on. That meant a lot to me that parent said that to me at the end of the season when I was like, man, what did I just do? But sometimes taking those chances, it's fun. People will go along on you on that journey if you explain to them why and you have fun and you make it worthwhile. And, so you have to take chances. And we have to remember that sometimes somebody that put that show out on the floor, they took a chance, they tried something different. Maybe it didn't work like they hoped, but, can we applaud the boldness?
Right. And if you boil this down to the essence of what we're doing, we're building relationships. And, we kind of get stuck in the marching arts. And I've been very vocal about this. We try to compare ourselves to the NFL and to Broadway and to all of these things on the highest professional level. And that's great too. And that's what we're shooting for as an end product. That's what we want our productions to be. But at the end of the day, we're building relationship with students. We're building relationship with their families. And we're teaching them how to take risks and to grow from taking those risks. And the thing that we use to help them take those risks is trust. They have to trust that when we ask them to do those things, that it's not something that's going to harm them, is not something that's going to set them back, and that you're doing those things with them. You're taking the journey with them. And if they feel like they can trust you, the more they're going to be vulnerable, which goes back to what we talked about before. And we're trusting them, or they have to trust us in the fact that we've asked them for their time, we've asked them for their money, and we've asked them to sacrifice being with their friends for something that's much greater than those three things combined. That's the gamble. And if you put it all in numbers and results, then you're never, there's no football, there's no NFL team that's won it all, there's no NBA, there's nothing where one team has won it all forever. Otherwise, the thing would just go away. No one would ever do it again because you would know that group is just going to win it. So it goes in cycles. There are people that have won it more than others, but everybody has a chance at it. And that is the thing that keeps us honest. And that's the thing that keeps us coming back, is that if I take a chance with this, if I sacrifice these things, if I trust this person who is asking me to do these things, then I have a shot at getting to my dreams. And then you have to define what that dream is and make sure that it is achievable.
Well, and ultimately, the reason we all do it isn't because we want to, it's that gold medal anyway, because
right.
Ultimately it's the process and being together and loving the activity and having fun with your friends and getting to perform. I think back on drum corps, I don't even necessarily remember where we placed. Like I remember being with my friends and loving performing and having so much fun, and the experience of just the whole thing is what I remember. And that's what we're doing. We're great educators say to me, Tony, on these webinars and podcasts all the time, I'm building great young people. I'm helping them learn to be great citizens. Whether they're going to be a dentist or a garbage collector or whatever they do, I'm teaching them skills to help them. It's what you just said, to help them through their life, help build them. If you end up with that, reaching that goal, great, but that's not the point, really. The point is, what did I learn? What did I grow? Did I enjoy it? Did I become a better person?
Exactly. And I have to take it back to my drum corps experience. I was in Starve, Indiana, 91, 92, and 93. And of course, 91, we won the whole thing. But in 93, we were second place by a tenth of a point. And that to me was the year that was, I can remember every day of that year, because we were almost like Vikings on a burning ship. Like we were trying to forge a new path in the activity, and we had this unique product. We were getting booed at shows, and it was all a part of the narrative.
Yeah.
We didn't win, but it was the process. It was that whole taking a chance on something that was completely oddball and out in left field that made that experience so much more unique than actually winning it 2 years before.
How lucky you were to be a part of that. I mean, Tony, as you know, that's one of the shows people still talk about the most. I mean, it changed the activity. We all admit it. It was controversial. Like, how exciting that you were there and you got to experience and be a part of that. And that's a great example of, it's not necessarily about outcomes as much as the experience and how we grow. And man, that's fun. I know that that's been true in my life, and like I said before, some of the great experiences I've had were just, by the way, Tony, people stay in color guards and drum corps and winter percussion groups that don't win. They stay in them year after year because they love being there. They love the experience that team is giving them. That's what matters. That's what matters to people. It's not, am I going to make finals or did we medal or whatever? It's like, did I love the experience of being in this group for the season? And I think people need to remember that as part of the same conversation too.
Right, and that's the goal for my groups. At Pedal, we end every rehearsal. Mostly every Saturday, because every Saturday we do a 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. rehearsal. And at the end of the night, we sit in a circle, the entire group, because I want everybody to be able to see everyone. And we have that as a moment of sharing, a moment of, what did you learn today? What is your partner's group? You can say anything. If you're a freshman, you get to say the same things as a section leader, because ultimately, I want them to know that this is their family, and that in any place in the world, this group is their home. This is their thing. This is not my thing. I'm setting the table for them to eat. It's their food, it's their table, it's their thing. And I want them to know that, and I want to reinforce that. So you saying that about, people staying in those, and we know we'll probably will never medal at WGI World Class. We don't have the same resources that they have in Southern California or in Indiana or whatever. But it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. The fact that we get to go, and I always tell my kids, not bad for a bunch of country kids. That's my tagline. That we get to take a little bit of who we are and take it to the national stage, that's a win for us. That's medaling for us. And as
Yeah.
long as my kids know that, it's not that we're not shooting for the top. We are shooting for the top. But at the end of the day, if we're able to share who we are and we know who we are as we're sharing it, that's what matters the most.
Yeah, we should remember, what's the point of it? The point of it really is to get to like be part of a show, make music together, get to perform. The whole experience of going through the season and growing and learning something and getting it better and better, like that's what this is all about. And I just think it's nice to remember it. And I love that you've talked so much about being vulnerable, because I think that if every time I sit down to watch a show, not only do I want to remember this sort of thing I mentioned before about we don't know what they've been through, we don't know what it took for them to show up there today, we don't know what they've been through, we don't know who these students are and how much they've grown, we don't know any of that. But I love this idea of constantly reminding myself, let me remember that everybody that's stepping out on that floor or on that field is being really vulnerable. The people that taught them, the people that designed the show, but especially those performers that are going to step up in front of us and say, okay, I'm going to show you what I've got and the best I can do with the show I have, and I'm going to see what I can do. And like, if you remember how vulnerable they're being, then there's no way that then you could go up to one of those kids afterwards and say anything cruel in a criticism. Exactly. There's no way you can do that. And if you remember that designer tried to make something fantastic, took chances, they were vulnerable. How could you be cruel to that person if you remember, I've done that too, and I know how that feels? And I think a lot of times, Tony, people especially can make cruel comments about design, but they're typically people that have never designed anything.
Right. Exactly.
So they haven't been that vulnerable or understand the process.
Right. Or they're designers who are kind of stuck in where they are, or kind of stuck in their own greatness, as I can say.
Yeah, that happens too.
Every year that with every project that I sit in front of, I just feel like I'm about to screw it up again. Like I've been doing this for a while, and it never, every time I look at a blank Sibelius score, measure one, or I'm sitting down with that mood chart or the events chart, and it's at the top left of the page, I go, this is about to be terrible, and I'm about to mess this all up, and no one will ever trust me with this again, and I'm awful. And I have wished most of the time that I've been doing this that would go away. Up until a few years ago, I was like, wait a minute, this is the thing that keeps me honest. The thing that keeps me honest is that I'm only one poor choice away from just wrecking this ship, and I've got to make sure that everything that I think of and everything that I try to put together has some kind of purpose. And I need checks and balances. I need someone to come in and like, hey, look, just to go do a side thing. I'm an enthusiast and an aficionado of stand-up comedians. I hope to be one day. And one of the things that they do with stand-up comedy is they ask them, there's a phrase they go, is this a thing? So they'll take a bit and they'll go blah, 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 blah. So is this a thing? And they'll go, no, that's not a thing. Like, no one will bite that. No one will laugh at that. I do the same thing with my designs. I'll go and I find whoever at the top of the activity that will talk, hey, is this a thing? Oh yeah, oh no, this has been done a million times. No one will buy that or whatever. So I try to make sure that I keep that sense of I'm about to tear the house down with whatever this is I'm about to put together, because it keeps me honest and it keeps me working and trying to get better at it.
Yeah, and the people that are at the top of the activity all will admit this. We've all heard Michael Gaines talk about the terror of putting down the first dot, because once you put those first dots down, you are on a path that you cannot move, so, and I will tell you that many, many times, very top designers and instructors have said this to me, and I think if you research it, you will find that's true of, great people that have designed the great ballets and Broadway shows and done the great artwork. Like, it's all the same thing, all creative work. has this sort of terror of, of not knowing what you're doing at the beginning. And I think that, like you said, I think that's not a bad thing. I think it keeps us honest.
And you have to be, you can't be afraid of it. You can be afraid, but you can't be afraid of it, because you're going to fail at it. You're going to do something that doesn't work. And you just got to be okay, as I say, failing on national television. And, the next time you come back up, you've got one more thing that you can say, all right, I don't know about these things, but I know that didn't work. And so you're one step closer to not screwing something up again.
Yeah, and again, remembering that all the time. Like, I would just tell everybody listening, like, every time that you read a book or you see a movie or you go to a Broadway show or you go to an art museum or anything that you see, somebody took a chance, they put themselves out that they were vulnerable. We have to start from applauding that first. And that's sort of like, I think, to me, that the reminder of people being vulnerable, and that it's kids, as you said, that's a lot in our activity. I think if we keep that in mind, then you won't end up being cruel. I've said things in the past that I was like, man, I should have said that a different way. I should have stopped and thought before I said that. And if I do that, I can go back to that person and apologize and say, man, that, blah, blah, blah. And if I built that relationship that you mentioned, we're okay. I don't try to always be perfect. I just try to always be honest. And if I make a misstep, I apologize, and on we go.
Right.
But I love this idea of remembering how vulnerable, especially those students on the floor. And I can tell you one other thing, Tony. Every time I think about this, especially in the winter, but I guess it's true all the time, but especially in the winter, if I'm seeing an indoor drumline show or a winter guard show, and I'm like it's not reaching me, like I'm like, okay, this show's not talking to me. I don't really like this, whatever. But I have learned something I will tell you, and this may be helpful to somebody listening, is I have found that, as you said, there's always something to like and to applaud. And sometimes I'll just find some student on the floor who is like having a great show or really has their skill set. They're on it, they're having fun. And even if I don't like the show, I can watch that student and I can be inspired and I can enjoy that performance. And that's gotten me through many shows, because there's always, like, I can respond to the joy of that performer who loves what they're doing, even if it's a show I don't like. Do I want to hear one word dreary ballad in a guard show? No, but you know what? If that's what they're doing, I can find that thing. And that's another way to look at this, I think, that's helpful to me.
Right. And also with adjudicators and designers, and we tend to consume a lot more of this than the average audience member or contest attendee, because this is our job. So we kind of see what's happening. Our job is to see what's happening in the world and to consume it on a daily basis. And there's some cynicism that gets, that can seep into our psyche when we do that, because if you're in Orlando, you may not necessarily, if you're designing something, you may not necessarily know what's going on in South Texas. But sometimes there's a lot of parallels. People have the same thoughts or inspired by the same things and come to the same results, So we as the consumers, being adjudicators and designers, we're seeing all of these parallels happen at once. And so it can, not another Adele show. Well, that Adele show was unique to that person in South Texas. It was just as unique as it was to the person in Orlando. So who am I to judge them with my, beat them up with my stick? Why don't I start with that person thought that was unique because it inspired them in a unique way. And just because they didn't know what was happening across the country doesn't make it any more or less authentic, or any less authentic or less special to them and what they sought to do with their kids. Who am I to do this? I feel like what has happened in our nation and just around the world with social media and politically and all of these things, we've normalized the opportunity to just be cruel to somebody and to literally destroy their worlds because we can, you know.
Yeah.
And that's something that I hope we can, with our activity and our reach that we have in our little universe, that we could at least kind of set some example for the people that we're in charge of.
Yeah, we need to have empathy and grace and kindness with each other. I talk about those words all the time. And don't say something on social media that you wouldn't say to the person if they were standing right in front of them. And I think as long as you remember that, you know, Tony, we're sitting here, we're recording this in early February when the Olympics are going on. And I got to tell you, I was just crushed that, you know, this Chinese figure skater fell on her routine, slammed into the wall, and then she is being just brutalized on social media in China. And I got to tell you, that hurt me personally. I just thought, here's this girl putting it all on the line. My God, is there anything more scary than putting on skates, flying around the ice and jumping in the air and then like, you know, like they are so ballsy and gutsy and brave to me, you know. So we lose that perspective. So I think we've made this point. They're being vulnerable. We have to remember that. We have to remember where we started. This is, Tony, you're so smart. Like, I love talking to you because the conversations are always insightful and meaningful. And I love that you have that voice. Keep using that voice in our activity. Let's keep having these conversations like this or on social media or however we can. And if you're listening to this, people, have this conversation with you and your team and your students. And like, let's remind each other every time we see somebody get on the floor, they're being vulnerable, they're trying their hardest. And let's remember that. Tony, what do you want to say as we finish this conversation?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, is that, you know, at the end of the day, we want people to take those chances of vulnerability. It makes our universe better that we're in. It makes our activity better. It gives us more avenues for creativity, which at the end will give us more things to see and more things to experience. But, you know, it will ultimately contribute to our demise as an activity if people think this is a place where they're coming to get slaughtered, whether it be a designer, a performer, or whatever avenue, whatever real estate you see as yours in this. If you know that this is a place that you're coming to get slaughtered, there will be less and fewer people that will take a chance, and it will eventually die.
Yeah, we're all in this together. We all love the activity. Let's support each other. Let's have kindness and grace. And I love it. Tony, such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for talking.
Thank you. All righty.